Good day and Happy New Year. Welcome back to Scriptures Unlocked. We are now on to Genesis chapter 43. We will now look at Joseph's brothers' return to Egypt. So this presentation is entitled Joseph's Brothers' Return to Egypt. So in the previous presentation, we ended with Joseph's brothers back in Canaan without Simeon, who was being held captive until they returned to Egypt with their youngest brother, Benjamin, which takes us now to Genesis 43, verse 1, which states, "And the famine was sore in the land. And it came to pass, when they had eaten up the corn which they had brought out of Egypt, their father said unto them, Go again, buy us a little food." So here, Joseph's brothers initially went to Egypt in the first year of the famine. But unknown to them, there were 6 more years of dearth to come. And they had consumed all the grain. So Jacob was now in a desperate position, a desperate situation, when he told his sons to go back to Egypt. But notice what happened. Genesis 43, verse 3 to 5. "And Judah spake unto him, saying, The man did solemnly protest unto us, saying, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. If thou wilt send our brother with us, we will go down and buy thee food. But if thou wilt not send him, we will not go down. For the man said unto us, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you." So as you can see from those verses, Judah objected strongly to his father's instruction and gave the reason because Jacob wanted them to go back to Egypt without Benjamin. But the brothers kept telling him that the man who was the governor, they were referring to Joseph, unknown to them, who was their brother. They told their father in no uncertain term, Judah in particular, told his father in no uncertain term that the man specifically told them that they would not be allowed to buy grain unless Benjamin was with them. And Judah had to repeat himself, as you can see in verse 3, he said it first, and in verse 5, he repeated himself and stipulate the only condition that would get them to go back to Egypt. Judah here demonstrated leadership when he issued an ultimatum to his father Jacob on what it would take for them to return to Egypt, and pay keen attention to the fact that they constantly referred to the governor of Egypt as, quote unquote, the man. In fact, Joseph was called the man 7 times in Genesis 43, verse 3, verse 5, verse 6, verse 7, verse 11, verse 13, and verse 14 by Jacob and his sons in total. Notice Genesis 43, verse 6 to 7. "And Israel said, Wherefore dealt ye so ill with me, as to tell the man whether he had yet a brother?" So there it is again in verse 6. Jacob referred to the governor as the man. "And they said, The man," notice again, "the man asked us straightly of our state and of our kindred, saying, Is your father yet alive? Have ye yet another brother? And we told him according to the tenor of these words, Could we certainly know that he would say, Bring your brother down? And Judah said unto Israel his father, Send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and thou, and also our little ones. I will be surety for him. Of my hand shalt thou require him. If I bring him not unto thee, and set him before thee, then let me bear the blame forever. For except you had lingered, surely now we had returned this second time." So Judah knew that his father was being crippled by the fear of losing his last son, the only remaining child of Rachel. So he took personal responsibility for Benjamin's safety and stood as surety for him. Judah here was trying to make amends, since he was the one who actually suggested to his brothers all the way back in Genesis 37, verse 25 to 27, that they sell Joseph into slavery. So here he showed some amount of leadership by telling his father that he would guarantee Benjamin's safety and he will ensure that Benjamin is brought back to Canaan when they return. Notice what transpired in Genesis 43, verse 11 to 15, when Judah made his intervention. "And their father Israel said unto them, If it must be so now, do this. Take of the best fruit in the land in your vessels, and carry down the man," there it is again, "a present, a little balm, and a little honey, spices and myrrh, nuts and almonds. and take double money in your hand, and the money that was brought again in the mouth of your sacks, carry it again in your hand. Peradventure, it was an oversight. Take also your brother, and arise, go again unto the man, and God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may send away your brother, that Simeon and Benjamin. If I be bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. So here, Jacob relented. Jacob finally came to the realization that the only way he would get his sons to go back to Egypt was if he sent Benjamin along with them. And he came to the point that he said something similar to what Esther would later say centuries later when she approached the king of Persia on behalf of the Jews. Esther would say, I will go before the king, which is not according to law, and if I perish, I perish. Here, Jacob finally gave in and said, if I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. And he allowed Benjamin to go with his brothers down to Egypt. Jacob, like all of us, when we have tried everything humanly possible, we then turn to God. And that's what he did. He finally gave in and said, and God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may send away your brother Simeon and Benjamin. If I be bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. And the men took that present, and they took double money in their hand, and Benjamin, and rose up and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. On screen, you can see Jacob saying farewell to his last son Benjamin, as he was now allowing him to go with his brothers to Egypt so they could have grain to sustain themselves throughout the famine. Genesis 43 verse 16 to 18 tells us this. And when they reached Egypt, and when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the ruler of his house, his steward, bring these men home and slay and make ready, for these men shall dine with me at noon. And the man did as Joseph bade, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. And the men, that's the brothers, were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house. And they said, because of the money that was returned in our sacks at the first time are we brought in, that he may seek occasion against us, and fall on us, and take us for bondmen and our asses. So Joseph's brothers were now paranoid and very terrified when the man, unknown to them again, that the man was their brother Joseph, whom they had sold into slavery. The man told his steward to take them to his house. And their minds immediately went to the fact that they did not pay for the grain on their first visit because their money was returned. And they came near to the steward of Joseph's house, and they communed with him at the door of the house, and said, O sir, we came indeed down at the first time to buy food, and it came to pass, when we came to the inn, that we opened our sacks, and behold, every man's money was in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight, and we have brought it again in our hand. And other money have we brought down in our hands to buy food. We cannot tell you who put our money in our sacks. So Joseph's brothers here thought they were being framed. So in an attempt to clear their names before being accused of a crime, they tried to get out in front of the situation and tell their side of the story of what transpired the very first time they came to Egypt. And here, the steward of Joseph's house was saying to them, relax. And he explained to them that he received payment for the grain that they received on their first visit. And notice what he said to them in verse 23. And the steward said, peace be to you, fear not. Your God and the God of your father had given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money, or in other words, I received your money. And he brought Simeon out unto them. So Joseph kept his word that as long as they brought back their youngest brother, they would see Simeon again. So Joseph's steward told them not to worry, because he received their payment the last time, which meant that Joseph must have paid for their grain and allowed them to keep the money that they had brought, which was a blessing to them from God. Because in a famine, you need food. Food will be scarce, and the next best thing that you need to have is money. So Joseph allowed them to keep the money that they brought down to Egypt so that they could buy food. And Joseph himself must have paid for the grain that they received, because the steward here said that I received your money. even though the money was returned in their sack, as they confessed. And the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their asses provender. And they made ready the present against Joseph, came at noon, for they heard that they should eat bread there. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house, and bowed themselves to him to the earth. So here again, Joseph's dream was being fulfilled, because all 11 brothers now were bowing down before Joseph. Because remember, in his dream, he saw his sheaf standing and all his other brothers' sheaves bowing down before him. So this was the first time that all 11 brothers were bowing down before Joseph, including Benjamin. And Joseph asked them of their welfare and said, "Is your father well? The old man of whom he spake, is he yet alive?" So here Joseph was communing with his brother, and this was the very first time he was seeing his brother Benjamin in 22 years. And they answered, "Thy servant our father is in good health. He is yet alive." And they bowed down their heads and made obeisance. So again they bowed to Joseph. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, "Is this your younger brother, of whom he spake unto me?" And he said, "God be gracious unto thee, my son." And Joseph made haste, for his bowels did yearn upon his brother. And he sought where to weep, and he entered into his chamber and wept there. And he washed his face and went out again, and refrained himself and said, "Set on bread." So as you can see there, viewers, Joseph continued to show concern for his father Jacob's welfare, but he was especially overcome and overwhelmed with emotions when he saw his younger brother, Rachel's only other son, whom he had not seen for 22 years and did not get an opportunity to have a personal relationship with him. Here on screen, you can see Joseph had to excuse himself, find a room, and actually he cried when he saw his brother, who shared the same mother as him, Rachel. He wept. And they set on for him by himself, and for them by themselves, and for the Egyptians which did eat with him by themselves, because the Egyptians might not eat bread with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination unto the Egyptians. So viewers, there were 3 separate seating areas and tables set up. One for Joseph, who was the master of his house, one for his brothers, and another for the Egyptians. And this was necessary because at that time, Egypt was a very racially segregated society, and the Egyptians did not associate with Hebrews, since they mainly reared livestock and had long hair and long beards, because the Hebrews were shepherds. So to associate with the Hebrews was an abomination to the Egyptians, because the Hebrews, they sported long beard, they had long hair, which came to their shoulder, which the Egyptians considered to be unhygienic, which was the very reason why most Egyptians shaved all the hair on their bodies. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men marveled one at another. So in other words, Joseph, who at this point was still speaking to his brothers via an interpreter, seated his brothers according to their birth in the precise order that they were born. He placed all 11 brothers at the table according to their ages. He instructed his steward to place Reuben at the head, then Simeon, then Levi, then Judah, all the way down to Benjamin. And when his brothers recognized that they were seated according to their ages, they were amazed. And they were clearly wondering, who is this man that could divine, that could know that these brothers were to be seated according to their ages. So they were amazed. And this was indeed a rare outcome to achieve if you did not know the precise order of these births. So here on screen, you can see that all the brothers were placed according to their ages. Joseph sat at his table, and they sat at their table, all 11 brothers. So notice that Joseph seated all his brothers according to their age, from the oldest to the youngest. And when his brothers saw it, they were amazed, because for someone who doesn't know the precise birth order, to accurately do that was statistically improbable, seeing that it would be 1 in about 40 million chance of that ever happening. And in order to get the statistics of that, all you have to do is to multiply 1 times 2 times 3 all the way down to 11, and that would give you the precise odds. It is 1 in 39,916,800 chance of that ever happening. So that is why they were amazed. It was nigh impossible for someone who has never known these brothers to accurately seat them according to when they were born. And the final verse in Genesis 43 tells us that Joseph took and sent messes, that's food, unto them from before him. But Benjamin's mess was 5 times so much as any of theirs, and they drank and were merry with him. Viewers, this was yet another test by Joseph to see how his brothers would react to Benjamin being so favored, because Joseph remembered how they resented him when their father showed him favor and gave him the coat of many colors. Joseph wanted to see if his brothers had changed, or if they had the same mentality when they threw him into the pit 22 years ago. When Joseph saw that his brothers did not show even an ounce of resentment towards Benjamin, but were happy with him, he realized that they had changed. So that brings us to the end of Genesis 43. In the next presentation, Joseph will put them to their final test to confirm if they really had changed. This test was under favorable situation, because even though they thought that they were being framed when they were taken to Joseph's house, they realized in the end that he was showing them great hospitality. And he wanted to see if when Benjamin was favored, if they would resent him. They passed the test with flying colors. But the final test in the next chapter will prove conclusive to Joseph that his brothers had indeed changed. So stay tuned to the next presentation, where Joseph will put them to the test. It was at this point in time that Judah would step forward and stand as surety as he promised his father, in order that Benjamin could return back to the land of Canaan. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And may God continue to bless us as we continue to make our way through the book of Genesis. Have yourselves a great day.